Alright. I guess I'm a minute early. But, welcome to episode 28 of Full Circle. As I say every other week, I'm your host. I'm Chad, Cheddar Caveman on this channel and every other bit of social media I've ever been on. Today, so Wednesday, it turns out is kind of a good day to be doing this because frequently we get news from Privateer on new things in the CID or releases or whatnot. They seem to happen, occasionally happen on Thursdays, but pretty frequently they happen on Tuesday or Wednesday. So CID was updated this week, and there's basically nothing that affects Circle, at least not directly. Go take a look, though, if you haven't. There's Recon has changed. They're calling it Recon 2. It now has 2 zones, 2 flags, and the objectives are about in the same place. I have not yet played it. Obviously, it's been out for, well, it was out a little bit earlier, but I haven't had any games since last Thursday, which is my normal game night. So I haven't played it. Might get a shot at it this week. We'll see. I think it seems interesting. I know a lot of people were complaining that Recon felt like a very dead scenario to them in this edition, and so they wanted some change. We have some change. I think in this edition, going to having multiple zones is good. I think that was the only scenario that didn't have at least 2. And it's sort of a nice counterpoint to Outflank or Outlast or Outfight, whatever they're calling it now, the 2 circles. So there's one with 2 circles and 2 objectives, and now there's kind of like one with 2 rectangles and 2 objectives, and there's also flags on this one. But I think it's a good, like, you know, in a tournament, assuming you had a 6-round tournament, which is not the norm. You know, now there's going to be a scenario where in one case you're going to have to deal with the fact that the zones are Warjack and Battle Engine and Warbeast centric, pardon me. In the other warrior model, units and solos. So I think that's interesting. I kind of like it thematically. We'll see, obviously, where things end up on that. There's some other pieces that are being cleared up. There's still discussion over how table markers are going to work. There's still discussion over a few minor things. Some of the terrain placement rules are still being talked about. So if you're in the CID, play some games, give some feedback. Be positive in your feedback or constructive. There's been a lot of, and this is my opinion, obviously, you're all adults, do what you think is best, but my opinion is that there's been an unnecessary amount of toxicity over some of the things in CID this version, and there's been a lot more people participating in CID than did in Grimkin, which sort of makes sense with the fact that this steamroller affects every battle engine. Every faction has a battle engine at this point, so it makes sense. Anyways, be constructive. Look at things try to approach them positively, and then be constructive if they're not. Going in there and saying, I don't like this, or I don't see how this could work, or, is largely unhelpful and likely to get your feedback ignored. And if you get too far off the deep end, I believe they still reserve the right to remove you from the process entirely. So going with that mindset. Remember, you're beta testing something, you're not designing it. Anyways, that's just my minor soapbox. I'm not going to belabor the point. So the other changes, there were a lot of battle engine changes in there, but none of them for the Fulcrum, which I think is good. I felt like they really dialed the Fulcrum in, like, from my couple of games with it, I felt like they dialed it in very well. I unfortunately did not post my feedback, or I would let you guys know. And the reason is I started trying to type it up Friday morning, and I did not remember to take any pictures, and I remembered how the game went, but not really well enough to provide coherent feedback. And I didn't want to post half-assed feedback, so I didn't. I may try again this week. I need to really try to remember to actually take pictures, through basically the end of every turn, and that will certainly help me remember what's going on and be more relevant. I might also use my my blog, which is at cheddarcaveman.com. to do a little bit of that too, or maybe even just for myself. I just need to start doing that. So anyway, so this week, and in the CID there's a bunch of changes to Bane, the Bane stuff again. Cool changes, but nothing too impactful for Circle in my opinion. If they start playing more infantry, we will respond accordingly. If they start playing more, it's just, that's more of a meta situation. We'll deal with that as needed. Just to give a little bit of a shout out and props, Dan Yount won Kingdom Con Masters with Circle. His pairing was Wormwood and Mosar. Again, he played that at ATC and was quite successful with it there. He was quite successful again with it here. If you go over to ghost-dice.com, you can, he has a pretty good write-up of his game with Mosar and his thought process behind Mosar and things like that. So take a look at it. It's really interesting. I played a list similar to his, and I now see what his, hearing how he's playing it really changed a little bit of how I think I want to approach it if I do. So that's interesting. I have been overly aggressive typically with Mosar and gotten him killed a lot. Dan seems to not have that problem, or be better at playing him into lists that he should be playing him into. Also, he talks about not relying on Pillars of Salt, as Mosar has other cooler things to be doing. So yeah, take a look. It's not how it's not how it worked out when I was playing him, but I sort of see what Dan's going for. We've talked about Mosar on here before, but take a look at that. I just really wanted to highlight a positive Circle situation. So that brings us to, what do we talk about today? I haven't strictly planned anything, but I do know what we haven't necessarily talked about. So let's take a look at some of the things out there. I think we're gonna do a little bit of a Blackclad episode. We haven't talked about some of them, so we're just gonna go right into it there. So I want to talk first about the Blackclad Stoneshaper. It is obviously a Circle solo. It has Blackclad in its name, so it is also a Blackclad solo. So just in case anybody's not super clear on that, I think it would be okay with me when they do stuff like this if they would actually still just say Circle Blackclad solo, even though it feels very redundant when Blackclad's obviously in the name. But I think I'm all about alleviating confusion on these cards. Like, they added Pathfinder to things like Battle Engines, even though they say they have Pathfinder to clear that up, and Construct to things like Warjacks. So it's not necessary, but it would potentially help out. Anyways, the Stoneshaper is a Circle solo. It is speed 6. Honestly, it's speed 6, defense 13, armor 13, command 5, and it has Pathfinder. It's 5 wounds, 3 points, field allowance 3. I didn't say it's Meta Rat because it has no melee or ranged attacks. It does, however, have a magic ability of 6, and it has 3 spells that he can cast. Quiet the Stones, which is an action, range command, so the 5 I mentioned before. Target friendly faction construct Warbeast. If the Warbeast is in range, you can remove a Fury point on it. You can place a Fury point on it or remove 1 Fury point from it. Second ability is Repair D6. This is a magic action, so keep that in mind. I know Repair sometimes is, sometimes isn't. Here it is. So Repair D6, range is base to base. Target friendly faction construct model. That's important. If the model is in range, remove D6 damage points from it. And Stone Spray, which is an attack. It is range spray 8, POW 12 magic, and has critical knockdown. And then finally, he has the Stone Sentinel rule, which is similar to, there's a word for it for Warjacks. Anyways, Stone Sentinel, which is while in base to base with a friendly faction construct model, this model gains +2 defense and armor and cannot become knocked down. Okay, so probably don't have a ton to go into with this guy. He's very simple when you look. He has 5 wounds, in case I missed that. I think I said it, but 5 wounds. 3 points is pretty cheap for a solo these days, so that's one thing to keep in mind. 4 points is kind of the starting point for most solos, so 3 points is in the like bargain area. Obviously, no melee weapon means no charges, so that's a little bit of a downer. But really, you're bringing this guy for those magic abilities and the fact that he is actually a little bit survivable if you have stones in your list. So he goes to armor 15, defense 15, armor 15, and no knockdown, which is nice because there's a lot of time. A lot of our wolves already can't be knocked down, and like, in fact, most of them. I think everything but the Wold Warden. I have to check on that. I think everything but the Wold Warden. Anyway, the fact that they can't be knocked down, and yeah, so now you're not going to get this weird thing like, well, we gave it +2 defense, but because you hugged this really low defense model to get that, and we threw like an AOE at it that has knockdown, it's knocked down, and that part's useless. Like, so that's cool. At the point where its armor is, it's also pretty resistant to blast damages usually. So that's good. And yeah, so it can be decently survivable. But the real thing is here that this is a really good support model if you have any amount of constructs in your list. So just little tidbits to keep in mind. One, repair is not limited to once a turn by any means, just in case you weren't sure. It's not. So on something like a Woldrath, being able to repair 3d6 if you brought 3 of these is pretty critical. I mean, you're going to average 10 to 11 boxes off of something. I mean, that's significant. You also, the thing with Quiet the Stones that's really good is the fact that you remove the Fury before the beginning of your next turn. So that's when Shifting Stones historically have done it right, and that's still really good Fury management and still very usable, and still in some cases you're going to say like, well, Shifting Stones are the same points, I should take Shifting Stones. I think sometimes you're just going to want to take both, frankly, but this ability is really going to be critical if you need to ensure you have a transfer. Being able to ensure that is sometimes the difference between whether you can get that one more attack out or not. Because if you need transfers to stay alive, you're like, well, I can't make this last attack because if I do, it'll be full, and that's a problem because I can't transfer to it. So that's really critical. Also, it's just Fury management, right? So it's really good. Again, if you bring 3 of these, that's 3 more Fury you can take off. Combine that with the Fulcrum changes, combine that with the Shifting Stones, and you can actually run a lot of Wolds in a list very successfully. So something to definitely keep in mind there. And really the other thing, and so now you have repair, so you can keep those Wolds working in any list. You have some Fury management, which can keep them going. So this guy's a great support piece already. And what I like about him over the Shifting Stones in some cases is he does bring that spray. So there's going to be times where you're like, well, let's take a Bradigus list or a Baldur 2 list, for example, right? So you're like, okay, I want to have stones in this list for the movement pieces and for the management it does and what the stones bring. We've talked about them. But what they don't bring is any offensive output. And there's just going to be games where there's just enough models on the table where you're like, yeah, I can tank these, but you have no ability to really be able to clear up like a charge lane or whatever, and you could just be overwhelmed with guys. Well, Magic Ability 6, which goes up to effective 7 if you do have a Fulcrum, which is nice, is going to be... It just gives you more attacks out there, right? It's not the greatest, but it's still a Magic Ability 6 spray, which means it ignores a lot of stuff. It's not a ranged attack, so you can't aim it, but it also can't... Like, it's not getting reduced by as many things either. Not as many things affect magic as affect ranged attacks generally. You can also move, and it's going to still be a 6, whereas like if it was a 5 that you had to aim, it has a crit knockdown, which can be huge. So if you have a Woldrath, that aspect could be the difference between getting assassination or not, potentially, or getting something that's easy to hit or not. Things like that. So I don't necessarily want to go in. There's not really a ton to talk about with this guy. I think if you're playing Wolds, you should consider them. If you're playing the Bones of Orboros theme force, they're one of the solos you want to consider adding for free. And they're just all around a good support piece. I think if you're bringing... oh, and I didn't mention this, but it can heal any construct model. So your Sentry Stones have 8 hit points, And being able to heal them up is the difference between probably it lasting another turn or not sometimes. Same thing with your shifting stones. So they can heal themselves, of course, but then they can't move. And so that gives you a good opportunity there. It can heal the Fulcrum, which now getting more boxes. Again, being able to heal 11 points off of that with 3 of these guys could be a big difference maker in your game. We don't have like a construct caster yet, but if we ever get a battle engine caster, come back around to looking at these guys. Although I don't know if all battle engines are constructs. I'd have to check. Anyway, Circle doesn't have one yet anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So yeah, all around solid piece. I don't really have a whole lot more to say. When I've played it, I've been happy with it, and I think if the list you have is one where it fits, then it's going to be a good fit. So that is all I have to say about that. So let's just carry forward. We got the Blackclad Wayfarer, which is also Circle Solo. It does count as a Blackclad, of course, because it's in the name, as I just mentioned. This model is Speed 6, Strength 6, Mat 7, doesn't matter. Defense 14, Armor 13, and Command 7. Has Pathfinder. It has a melee attack that is a Volge, which is range 2, power and strength 10, and it is a damage type magical. 5 wounds. These are field allowance 2 and cost 4 points. On the back of the card, he has Battle Wizard, which is, I think I've talked about it before, but once per turn, model destroys 1 or more enemy models with a melee attack during its activation. Immediately after the attack is resolved, it can make 1 magic ability, special attack, or special action. There we go. And then it has 3 magic abilities, so it's magic 7, so 1 better than the last guy. It has Hunter's Mark, which we've talked about with Lanissa. It's the same exact rule, star attack. It's a ranged magic attack, no damage. Friendly models can charge or make slam power attack against the model hit without being forced or spending focus, and the model charging can gain plus 2 inches of movement, and it lasts for a turn. He has Phase Jump, which is an action. If it is within 2 inches of a shifting stone model, place this model anywhere completely within 12 inches of its current location. Otherwise, place it completely within 2 inches of a friendly shifting stone model anywhere on the table. After using Phase Jump, the model's activation ends. And then Stone Spray, which is the exact same as I mentioned before. Spray 8, Power 12, crit knockdown. And Blackclads have Prowl. First note for the Mark II folks, it used to be immune to fire, cold, and lightning. It is not immune to those anymore, so don't make any mistakes there. But it gained Prowl in response, so a bit of probably a better trade more times than not, I would say. I think Prowl is kind of always relevant, whereas the damage types were situationally relevant, but it does change some strategies that we used to have where you would just bring one of those guys for a sack pawn for Morvana. You have to do that with something else now. If you want to do that. Druids still have it if they cast the spell with the attachment. And actually, they're immune to corrosion now, too, as I talked about in that episode. So, just a note there. The other big change is he gained Battle Wizard. So, to me, and otherwise, he's the exact same as Mark II. Point cost translates the same, etc. So, this guy is like already utility solo. So, he's a Mat 7 model with reach. So, that makes his charges good. He has the ability to he has like the best sprint in the game because he can charge a model, kill it with his thing, and then be placed 2 inches of a shifting stone, which is hopefully back somewhere really safe. He also has the ability now to go way deeper potentially with his sprays by charging, kill, spray very deep. Same with Hunter's Mark. You can get a Hunter's Mark out as far as like 19 inches now. 19 inches. Barring any other movement shenanigans. So that's really big, right? So that's a really cool change. I would say you frequently want to still be focusing on bringing this model when it's going to be taking advantage of both Hunter's Mark and potentially the spray. Not necessarily every game will you take advantage of both, but you want there to be good reasons to use both. If you don't really think that you're going to be doing a lot of charges, then I might say like, well, this may not be the piece you want. If you don't have any other way to deal with infantry, like you can still bring it for infantry, but for 1 more point you get sentry stones, which I think you're going to want more frequently than this guy. He's still more accurate. He's still very good, but I think for the points, you kind of want the dual situation of like, well, Hunter's Mark is kind of like plan A and like almost A, like plan A minus, and then like the spray is kind of like plan B minus, and the other ability is just like cake, right? Like, well, I can charge this guy and kill him and be safe, and I don't want to lose my Blackclad yet because I know I'm gonna need more sprays later or more Hunter's Mark later. That's kind of how I see him. At 4 points, he's totally fair. There used to be this big debate. Lanissa was 3, and she was taken everywhere. And because you could get Hunter's Mark for 3 points, there's some debate like, oh, she's just always better than a Blackclad. And she even wasn't then. The thing is, the Blackclad's other abilities did make it better by a point. +1 mat. I personally think Spray 8 is better than Range 10, Pow 12. Crit Freeze, just because you're going to be able to hit more models, and they both had Prowl. I think 14-13 is actually a better stat line than 15-11, but just barely. I think the fact that it's faction was also a big deal. I think the fact that it's a Blackclad now is becoming an even bigger deal with the Fulcrum, and the placement with the stones is probably a better niche ability than Winter Storm from Lanissa. So if you were really teching for Legion, I think Lanissa is still today the better model. If you're not taking specifically for Legion, and like that's Legion would really have to take a spike, in my opinion, in popularity before I would say that you need a piece as strong as Lanissa to do that. And right now, that's just not the case. But the Blackclad is just like this great utility piece. The more you play it, the more you're going to get out of it. They were great. They really didn't change a lot from Mark II. The Prowl thing is an advantage, like I said. But other than that, I think they're in a really good place. If you have War Beasts, I think that want to charge, this is something you want. So, for example, I would say in a list like, say, Kaya 3, you want charging War Beasts. With melee War, she may not always, but frequently Kaya 3 is going to want charging War Beasts. Kaya 2 wants charging War Beasts, right? Her threat range is long, but you may want it to be longer. Chromac 2, certainly going to be charging with Beasts. So in a list like that, it's going to double dip, right? And where you're going to be able to set up the charges, and you're going to be able to set up, like, okay, well, I actually need to be able to do work against infantry before I'm really going in there with those sprays. He's great for that. I talked about my Wormwood list that I played at Adepticon and ATC, and in that list, I had Lanissa, I thought about a Blackclad, and I dropped them, and the reason why I dropped it was because I was really focusing on using Loki, a Pureblood, Wold Weirds, and things like that, and what I was doing, pardon me, what I was doing with that was saying, you need to come to me. And as a result of that, saying that, like, I'm not really reaching out and touching them. So the Hunter's Mark was a free charge, but it was never a threat range increase, and it was never absolutely necessary with the way that list wanted to play, because I want to shoot you with Wold Weirds, I want to shoot you with Pureblood, I want to hook you in with Loki, etc. So that's something to keep in mind. I think if in your list they're coming to you, this model is going to not be as necessary, not be as good. If you're going to them, it's great. And don't forget it is model, so a lot of times we focus on that free charge because it's for War Beasts, but it's certainly relevant for giving us some longer threat ranges on other models too. Things like honestly, really anything that is attacking melee is potentially going to take advantage of that longer charge range. I find most of the time it's when I need to get a beast in on something, but just keep that in mind. And a free charge is kind of the equivalent of saving a fury, right? So that changes your damage math. So it's really good in that aspect. But again, much like the last model, I don't have a ton to go into with this. I would say it's a piece to consider. It's a strong piece. I think owning 2 of them is going to be good for your collection all the time. The chat's talking a little bit about are warlocks and who focuses on constructs. So yes, to agree with one of the posters, Bradix and Baller do focus on constructs, but they are not themselves constructs. I don't know that we will get a construct warlock unless we get one that's a battle engine. I'm not really expecting like a Balder to get the Zal 2 treatment, really. They could. We'll see. It could be somebody entirely different, too. But they've kind of got that flavor going with Scorn and Convergence a little bit already, so I don't see it. I do hope we get some new Construct War Beasts sometime soon, though. We've had the same ones for quite a while now. Anyways, we're going to just keep moving this train right along, because these are sort of some smaller pieces, so just kind of get some information out there about them. So another Blackclad model, it doesn't have Blackclad in its name, but it is Blackclad type. The solo is the Druid Wilder, so we haven't talked about her. She is a Circle Blackclad solo. She's speed 6, mat 5, defense 14, armor 11, command 6 with Pathfinder. She has a staff, which is range 2, power strength 8, and it is also damage type magical. 5 boxes, FA 1, and 4 points. Pardon me, I'm dry throat tonight. She has attached, so before the start of the game, attach this model to a friendly faction warlock for the rest of the game. Each friendly faction warlock can only have one model/unit attached to it. She then has arcane support, which is while this model is in the warlock's control range, the warlock can upkeep one spell for free without spending fury. She has hurting, so while in this model's control range, the warlock while this model is in its warlock's control range, the warlock can force, leech, reave, heal, and transfer damage to the war beasts in its battle group that are in this model's command range. So that can be really big. She has magic ability. It doesn't actually have an attack number by it because none of these are attacks. But there's 2. So she has Medicate, which is range base to base. Target friendly faction living war beast. If it is in range, remove D3 damage from it. And Shepherd's Call, which is a star action. Remove up to 1 fury point from each friendly living faction warbeast currently within 3 inches of this model. So pretty basic model again. This is our Warcaster support, Warcaster attachment. In War Machine, you might notice they have several options. We have the one at the moment. We have the Wilder is all. It'd be cool to get some more. I think it'd be like I could see like some sort of Tharn attendant maybe would be pretty neat, or like bodyguard type model. Anyway, so she's it. So when do you want to play the Wilder? I think from reading through the abilities, you can see what she's bringing to the table. Free upkeep. So that's Fury efficiency, right? That's 1 Fury your Warcaster doesn't have to spend. Shepherd's Call, so some Fury management there. Medicate is, I would say, the least relevant of her abilities. Second least, maybe. And Hurting is interesting. So let me kind of work backwards from that. Hurting is something to remember. It has, frankly, almost never come up for me. It might be a time where you want to run her to the edge of your caster's control area to extend it by another 6 inches for a piece to go in without risking your Warcaster. But by and large, I have not found situations where I felt like that was an advantageous thing to do. She's obviously not mixing it up in melee very often. Mat 5, POW 8 is not really what you want to see. That said, it is a magic weapon, so every once in a while you might find use out of that. In late game, you may charge just because you need to. 1411 is a decent stat line if you can avoid blast damage, because at armor 11, even with 5 boxes, a good blast will kill her, so keep that in mind. She does not want to be on fire. So then let's work in a little bit what more is relevant. So Medicate is solid, I would say. It's clutch to be able to, again, we're talking Fury efficiency, right? So being able to upkeep a spell for free is really good. Being able to heal an aspect on a living beast so that you don't need to, again, spend Fury on your Warcaster is going to be really good. She's only speed 6, so getting in position will sometimes be tricky, I would suggest, but that is what it is. And then Shepherd's Call. So this is probably the most potentially strong rule, right? So within range of 9 of where she starts, she can remove at least 1 Fury. So she's at least as effective as the at Fury management as the Blackclad solo for construct. So this is for living, but it's same idea. In certain lists, she's going to be able to remove multiple Fury, and that just gets significantly better the more you can do. Obviously, positionally, it's going to be tough to get everything in position to do that, but there's some casters where that's just really going to be a strong play. So the places that I've really looked to play her generally are when I know I'm going to have upkeeps that, and on, I'm even more likely the lower Fury of the caster, and more likely the more spells I know they want to cast. So the two that immediately jump to mind, these are not the only two I've played her with, but the immediate two that jump to mind are Tanith, who has 3 upkeeps, I believe, and you're almost always going to have at least 2 of them out there. Kaya 2, she takes massive advantage of all of the relevant rules on this model. The removing 3 Fury is super, that is very critical to the list I've been playing with Kaya, because she's going to have beasts, and on her feat turn, she's going to be able to bring her beast back by her. So if you keep the Wilder alive until then, I've removed 5 Fury, I think, with that ability before, maybe 6 ones. Easily 3 or 4, many times though. I have I've rarely used Medicate, but when I have, it's been really helpful. The free upkeep Kaya really loves as well. So it's just, again, it's a really good piece. So anytime, it's a piece too where you have to start saying, like, for 4 points, do I need to get another 4-point model in here, or do I need to make room for maybe something else? Is it worth it to have to pay for these upkeeps? Because that's the thing that you're always going to get out of her, is that free upkeep. So be very cognizant when you're doing it. And don't be afraid, I would say don't be afraid in a lot of cases to cut that model, depending on the size of your battle group and the amount of upkeeps and what else you need your list to have. So even in Tanith, I really do like having the piece, but sometimes I just need to pay that extra Fury, right? Don't look at her too much if you're very Wold-centric. It doesn't remove Fury from Wolds, which is unfortunate because she's in the theme force for the Wolds, and I don't really... It's kind of confusing why to me. So she does give the free upkeep, and she's a Blackclad, so I guess it's kind of about that, but I wouldn't really play her in that list too frequently. So it is sort of unfortunate she doesn't show up in the themes you want, and we haven't really got a straight up Blackclad theme yet, so that's another aspect. But she's a good piece. Make sure that you're looking at it and knowing whether you need it or not. Be judicious. Like I said, like something like Kaya 2, maybe Kaya 3, maybe Chromac 2, things like that, where you know you're gonna have a lot of beasts. Her necessity goes up. Where you're gonna have a lot of upkeeps, your necessity goes up, and everything else you may want to spend your points more efficiently. So that's kind of there. From the chat, I do think that Privateer Press is trying to make Wold lists better as well. The Fulcrum buffs show that. I think the Stoneshaper sort of alludes to some of that. The theme is very strong as well. So I think that's good. But it would certainly be exciting to see some more pieces for that. I think there's a lot of design space there for them to work with, and I hope that they do. Yeah. We've been cruising right along here. We might have time to do one more piece, maybe. What do we got left? Don't have a ton left that I actually want to get into. So there's a few things left, but I want to probably play them a little bit more. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the going through of the solos that we have for Blackclads. I think there's a lot of space, as I was saying, for them to design into a few more of those. I think that most of those pieces are things you're going to... sorry, not the Wilder, but the 2 first Blackclads are ones you're going to want to look at if you're playing the Bones of Orboros list. You can get... Theoretically, you can get 4 free solos, but certainly 2 or 3 is going to be easy. And I think those 2 or 3 are certainly you're going to try to get we don't really have any attachments. I don't think it applies to attachments. I don't think it's worth it to do the Stoneshaper for that, or really probably not a Gallows Grove either. But those type of lists are definitely going to benefit from the Blackclad and definitely from the Stoneshaper. So that's a great addition to that list. Also, anything that is a wold list that doesn't have has wolds in it, consider the Stoneshaper, just because being able to heal an aspect that you otherwise couldn't is going to be pretty important. But I don't have a whole ton else planned for this particular episode. Like I said, I was sort of thinking we were going to get more SCID. I did play, I guess it's been a week since this, but I did play the Celestial Fulcrum with the changes last week. And my take on it is that I actually think it's very strong but balanced where it is. The +1 to hit definitely came up. I was playing with Kruger too. Definitely came up. I want to try it with some Druids in the list as well, but Kruger did like having it. I played against Khador for one of the games where I don't think it really changed the outcome at all there. But making the Blackclad more a little better was nice as well. I think that it's... So the thing about it is you want it to always have Fury because you need it to be able to boost. But that did mean that you had to make sure your spacing was in a good place. You had to make sure you had enough Fury for both caster and that, or if you didn't, you're allocating to it. So at that point, it's just like allocating to a Warjack. The sprays the attacks, the range attacks felt good. I think removing the cloud from the fire was probably a good change given the other interactions. I think the package of... So the other thing that concerns me is, keep in mind, you're talking about 19 points here. That also wants more points with it. So the cheapest you could do and like fully fuel it would be a Fulcrum and a Wold Warden, and that's 35 points. And it may not even be the 35 points that fits in your list, but that's the cheapest you could go to fully fuel it without your caster at all. And then the next is like 2 Wold Weirds, Megalith, a Wold Guardian, and that's all going to be a little bit more. And so I played it in SR 2017, and I was not terribly loving having a low model count for those lists. It might still be okay. I haven't played a ton of it. But I was finding like I wanted to be able to go out and contest the flag and some other stuff, and I just couldn't, because if I put a model over there, it was going to be dead at that point in the game. I was able to recover and win, and I think some of the scenarios are going to take a little while for your opponent to get ahead. So if you can play that into an attrition advantage, you're fine. If you can't, it's going to be a little awkward. But all that in mind, what I'm saying is I feel like the Fulcrum is balanced at its points with what it does, because they alluded to this, but it's also in like a support role, right? Where that +1 is great, but it's 19 points. And it getting those boosts is really strong, but it needs to be able to get that from somewhere. It doesn't just produce it. So I think it's good. I think it's in a strong place, and I still think it's where I thought it was last week, which is when you're playing with it, you need to make a decision. Is this a Fulcrum list, right? Is this a list that you want a Fulcrum? And then the whole is going to be more than the sum of its parts. You might have 2 Wold Weirds in that, but like, what's the rest of your list look like? How are you supporting it? Maybe you have Druids, maybe you have Mistriders. In comparison to the other battle engines, how do I place it? I think it does more for Circle than some of the other battle engines do for their factions. So just to kind of go through, like the Khador Battle Wagon, I think is good, but I think the Khador Battle Wagon is good, but it's certainly not overpowered. But Khador is very good right now, and they have a lot of other strong pieces. The Trollbloods one I'm a little unsure of. I think the Meat Thresher is really interesting, potentially very good. I don't own one, so I haven't played it. I don't know that I'm really super excited about it in Circle, but I know somebody did play it with Kruger too, so you can see their battle report out on the CID. I think the Wraith Engine's in a pretty decent place. I think the what's the one in Legion called? The Hentai Monster. I'm blanking on it right now. Is very good for what it does. The Stormstrider got some changes today, which I think move it in the direction that you want to see. I think the Tep is probably still the best, just because sprays are that good and because of how many dice it gets to throw. The Storm Strider is good. I think the Fulcrum is very good. But again, I think it's very good because of it supporting other pieces in our faction. The rest of them don't really have that sort of restriction, I guess. The Crix one would be the closest one. It doesn't really have any additional utility outside of that type of support. So I think the fact that it got no changes this week is showing to me that Privateer and myself at the moment seem to agree that it is strong, but in a fine place with that strength. For 19 points, I think it's about right. If you look, first of all, the range attacks are all typed, so that potentially is a negative. Some positive too, but also a negative. For the person in the chat, you probably missed it at the beginning of my show. I actually talked about Dan's win, and he talked about the Fulcrum as well. Yeah, but I think it's good. I think it's strong. I think it's a great. I want to see more pieces in the game that are like this in total. This piece, the Wraith Engine, and the what the hell's the one in Grimkin called? The Death Knell. The Death Knell in Convergence, and in Grimkin, and a couple others are like this too. But I want to see more of, like, this piece does one thing, and if you bring, you still have options. Like, it's not locked into a set list, but like if you bring certain pieces, you're going to start generating a situation where the pieces add up to more than what they just do individually, right? And I think there's a place where you want things to individually be strong too, but I do like that, like, okay, well, I have a Fulcrum, and that module is going to have 2 Wold Weirds and a unit of Druids. And that's sort of the backbone of my list, and I keep sort of building off of that, maybe. The Wraith Engine's like that too, right? I'm bringing in undead things. I can bring this Wraith Engine, which also brings me Dark Shroud. So now I have Bane Knights who don't have access to Dark Shroud, but now I have this other way to give it to them, and that makes them stronger. Or Mechanothralls who are now only POW 13, they go, etc. So I think it's very strong, but I think it's good in its strength. Some of them are not exciting, like the Troll Battle Wagon, although I like the changes to it today that I'm now not recalling. I think it got more accurate if it was close to something. Anyway, the Khador Battle Engine, again, not super exciting. I like the Legion one also. It's more of an offensive piece, but that's fine. Same with the Pharaoh. The AFG seems good. It seems all about shooting, and it's going to win that battle. So I think it's very strong. I think there's going to be some casters it's good with. I don't think it's an auto-include, and that's important. If the Fulcrum felt like I have to play the Fulcrum, then it would be too good, right? Because I don't want to be on the show going like, okay, those of you who've tuned into my show to talk about Circle, pause, go out there to your local game store and buy yourself a Celestial Fulcrum, and then come back and we'll talk. I don't want to do that. So, and I don't think that's where we're at, and that's great. So, I'm pretty excited with where it's at. We'll see. This is not the last week for this, so I don't know if they'll have 1 or 2 more weeks on it. But I feel really good about this change. I think it's in a great place. I think from my playing it that, yeah, it was strong. And this is always tough to evaluate, right? When something goes up in strengths noticeably, that we kind of have a knee-jerk reaction a lot of times, especially your opponents who are playing against it will have a knee-jerk reaction to go, oh my god, that's broken now. It's way too good. It's overpowered. And I don't think that's the case, right? So if you look at it, has 3 attacks it's Rat 6 that are spray 10, range 11, and range 13 that are POWs 12, 14, and 15 respectively. And most things in the game don't have 3 range attacks, but they usually have a melee attack. So like the AFG has up to 2 ranged attacks, but from a significant distance away and is much harder to shoot because of some of its rules. The TEP has 3 sprays, which have more potential because of the number of dice you can throw. But the Fulcrum, yeah, you still have to choose what you're boosting, right? So if you need to hit, you're going to have to, like now you're doing this like, well, I need an 8 to hit. Do I boost the hit or do I boost the damage or do I just boost the hit and damage on one of these? Like, there's a lot of choices there that you still have to make. If you get lucky to go into like hit or heavy, you're like, even if I don't aim, I can just boost damage, right? And if you're going into lightly armored stuff, you're like, well, I'll just boost the hit, and that's you have to evaluate that all the time. But the thing is, it still has to be within at least 13 inches or closer to do its work. It is 30 boxes. It is armor 19. You could go with, I know somebody was playing it with Baldur 2 and felt like it was very strong there with Roots of the Earth going up to armor 22 with 30 boxes and having that firepower that was very strong. And I think that's good. I think it should be strong with Baldur 2. Like that's a thematic place for it to be. And it's just a really cool model. So like the more places you can put it, great. I still don't think you're going to see it with not to say you couldn't, but I don't really see it with like Chromac, either of them. I don't really see it with Kaya 2 or 3. Kaya 1, you might because of the occultation actually working on it. Basically, the places where it was strong before, but now you're going to think more about it when you're building. And it doesn't just get resources for free, so if late in the game you need those boosts, your caster's got to give that Fury over, and that's something you're not doing. Or, if it's still alive late in the game. Yeah, so that's where I feel about it right now. We'll see. I haven't read all of the feedback people have had on it. I know some people are like, oh, it's a little too much or it's not enough, and there seems to be a lot of concern with giving +1 to hit to our Warlocks, but we're kind of like our Warlocks are either slinging spells or slinging attacks at you, so I feel like it's actually appropriate, and for 19 points, like that's certainly not a broken ability. If anything, I would rather see it go to like 20 points before personally, I would, if they need to change it, they feel it's just a tad too strong, I would hope they would actually leave the rules and increase the points maybe to 20 instead of 19 or something like that. But actually, I think right where it's at is great. You can compare it like to Loki in our faction, right? Like Loki's obviously not going to be as good at range, but does a lot more utility and can hit a lot harder because of pulling the model in and things like that. So I think it's about in the right place. Well, but we'll see. Yeah. I think that's probably going to be about it for us this week. Sorry, this is probably not the most exciting of episodes compared to some of the last few. Next week, I'll probably be back with some more models units. We're almost through the roster, actually, though, so won't be too many more of those. Anytime, if you have questions, I can certainly discuss them, like I just did on the show. Or if it's something quick, I'll just shoot you an answer back on wherever you sent it to me. So don't feel shy to do that. I may also start. I've talked a little bit about the Kruger 1 list I've been playing, and by that list I mean I stole it from Colin Hill. I have another list I want to try. I have some other Warlocks I kind of want to give a go. So we may switch away from like talking about model/units to maybe some list discussion, or something of that nature. So. That'll probably be it for us this week. Real quick shout out. I'd like to thank Muson Minis for allowing me to host my videos there. It gets a lot of visibility out for me, and I'm very grateful for that. I'm also going to be at Muson Con at the end of the month. So if you are going to make it to Des Moines for that, it's a great time. The con is very inexpensive. The hotel is very inexpensive, and the atmosphere is great. A lot of games, a lot of War Machine Hordes, a lot of other games if you play other stuff. I am, in addition to playing some Circle there, hoping to play, if I get a hold of some of my Judgment Kickstarter, I'll also possibly be running a few games of that to get some visibility to that, because that's another thing I'm pretty excited about right now. And Griffin's Roost Painting, who is my other sponsor, is also going to be there. My wife Lauren will be teaching some painting classes, and she'll probably be in the Hobby Lounge, I would guess, most of the con. So if you want to learn how to paint cool models, check that out. If you have cool models that you want painted, check her out, griffinsroostpainted.com, or Griffin's Roost Painting on Facebook. And yeah, we'll be back next week with something new. And I want to thank everybody for watching, and we will see you later.